Well satisfied. All right, April.
You never really want to do it.
Right, we'll bring this special school board meeting to order. First thing we need is approval of the agenda.
Move we approve the agenda.
A motion. Second. And second, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-3. With that, we'll get started on our discussion things. First one is credit recovery.
I just want to come on up. So while they're making their way up, I went ahead and included in the report, the board policy that best fits the grading system, which does include credit recovery. And tried to give you guys just a little, history or a framework. So, you know, as a district, you want to think of it this way, we kind of lay the highway as far as the terms, the grading scales, credit value, and then they drive the cars. Like they figure out how it's going to happen, what categories they're going to use, whether they're going to weight classes or not, or weight different categories or not. The way they grade a freshman in high school and the way they grade a senior in high school is different and should be, you know. I love using the example of the math teacher who has algebra 1 and college calc. You should not grade those two the same. So we just set that framework, and as long as they roll within it, you know, we support what they're doing. As far as credit recovery goes, you know, it can and should look different on each scenario, because there's lots of different scenarios that are worthy of or needing credit recovery. We tried to outline some of those in the report. Something to keep in mind is credit recovery is an opportunity and not all kids take it. So nothing is given to the kids. The opportunity lies before them. It's up to them whether they decide to take it and actually do the work or take it on. So we kind of shared our goals for credit recovery in the report as well. Obviously keeping them on track to graduate with their cohort group, increasing our success rate and decreasing our dropout rate, and also providing them opportunities to be in some of those elective classes and things that are really important to the kids, especially as they get older. We listed a couple different options, and I have the team here, they're going to introduce themselves here in a minute, but a couple options on there. Again, it's not one thing, not one option that fits every single kid or every single scenario or every single case. So we have them here to answer those questions. We gave you some student examples, and I'd like, if you guys could introduce yourselves, and then Lisa, if you wouldn't mind sharing the notes section where we kind of talked about the why behind it. You guys want to just go ahead and introduce who you are and tell the team what you teach maybe? Because they've all been involved in credit recovery in some way, shape, or form.
I'm Nicole Weller. I teach math at the high school. I did credit recovery last summer for the first time, and then helped with credit recovery this winter.
I'm Jordan Carlson. I teach family and consumer sciences at the high school, and I'm also the work-based learning coordinator. And I've done, I think, every year of summer credit recovery except for one, maybe 3 summers.
I'm Laurel Appleter. I teach urban space science in one section of freshman health. And I've been a part of the summer credit recovery program since the beginning.
Bud Young, principal, Clayson High School.
Mike Hughes, principal at Wakefield.
Lisa Last, district counselor. And I will share that when we first started, I've kind of helped with this, I think, since we started doing, or since I've been here around. And what we kind of thought it was going to be for, to make sure that our seniors had enough credits to graduate. And what we kind of have learned is that we have a bigger proportion of freshmen and sophomores who get a really rough start to high school, that just are not making that transition well, failed multiple classes in those first year or two. And so that really has been our focus, and that should not be an aha moment, because research does tell us that that is, you know, kind of the secret sauce. If you could get those freshmen and sophomores kind of rehabilitated and recover that credit, it gives them hope and motivation often to then go ahead and finish. If you are, already starting your sophomore year and you're basically still a freshman, that is not motivating whatsoever. And, we know that something happens usually in that late second semester of sophomore year to that first part of junior year, where kids, for a lot of kids, it does kind of click in and they're like, okay, I can see the end and I'm ready to go. And so credit recovery has given us an opportunity to make the most of that and to help those kids get to that feeling of hope a little bit quicker than it might have been if they had to just keep wallowing and trying to figure out how am I ever going to get out of this pit and not want to persist in our school.
So we wanted to open it up and let you guys ask any questions, whether it be about a student example, because we tried to give specific student examples without saying names, obviously, as well as some of our options, because they all talked about working, like, whether it be the summer or winter, but we have credit recovery actually going on all year long. It just looks different depending on what the kids need. So what questions do you guys have that they can help answer?
The first one I have is that when I got this, I was a little surprised when we talked about this the last board meeting. It was at 55%. I didn't realize the other options were there, going all the way down to 45%. Okay, is that so? Here's my whole thing: is I have no problems with kids having second chance to be able to recover. Okay, and I get it when they're young. I mean, again, I can relate it. I taught free algebra 5 hours a day when I first started teaching Santa Fe Trail, and that's why even pairs. I know the value of pairs, and when you do that, is that and yeah, there are kids that need a little bit more attention, and they hit that spot where they mature. And you stay in college, everybody's like an apple, they don't all turn red at the same time, and some of them need a little bit more time. I truly believe that. My concern with this, and all that I'm asking, and to make sure we're sure, is that I get we want them to feel good, I get all that. I just don't want this to be a program that turns into basically like a participation trophy, is the best way I can put it. And when I go through the examples, and it takes 3 days on the student A, on student A on the first example, he's got a 57%, right? And then according to this, it takes him 3 days to make up that 3%. Okay, to me, that sounds reasonable to me, being a math person, and I know it's not all cut and dry, believe me. But then you look down in world history, and the other student makes up, in 2 days, he makes up 14%. And when I see that, that's my concern, is that does the work really match getting them caught up? As opposed to, okay, you've done this, we're moving you on, and you get to graduate.
That is a great question.
Is that, and then I'll take it on to being a senior then, is that we all have graduation goals, is that a senior, if they can make that up and all of a sudden they graduate in that short amount of time, yeah, they feel good because graduating makes our thing, but is that really, are they really getting it accomplished? So I guess that's my hang up with Jack from the very beginning. Are they putting in the work when I see stuff like that? And then the last one says they made up 5 classes in the summer of 2023. To me, that almost seems like impossible to go full time. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the dots I like to have it drawn to where it's just not like it feels like, okay, we're making them good and we're passing them along, but are we really doing them a favor? That's my concern with the program. Okay?
And that's a really good question. So can we share some examples? I mean, obviously not student names, but I know a few of us work with student A and student B, and they're 2 very different students. So anything you guys want to share?
I would say, of course, rigor is important, and, we want to maintain that academic integrity of our programs.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we always look at is, what level is the course? World history is a freshman level course. And if you get a kiddo that's super motivated and just wants to get stuff done and get going, because they are things like, fill in the blank worksheets, retakes on tests, those sorts of things. It is possible to make up 14% in 2 days versus a kiddo that just needed to finish the senior project and turn it in, and didn't actually ever start it because they got a bad case of senioritis. So, you know, if you need 3 full days to do that, that's a little bit different scenario versus, you know, a freshman in world history class. I would also speak to the concept of, you know, student motivation and work speed. We've got some kiddos that unfortunately due to scheduling step out for, you know, a quarter of a day, a half a day. Some of them, you know, their families are dependent upon them to work and bring home money in order to pay the bills. And so, you know, it may look like they're taking 3 full days, whereas they stepped out for a couple hours here or, you know, a half a day here. And so the concept of time and the concept of rigor are things that we definitely keep track of. We have input from teachers from all class sections. If a student fails, we ask for their input every single year. And so this idea of, you know, what would the teacher like to see them do is also taken into consideration. Do you want to?
I was to your comment about our seniors. We haven't been doing this for 10 or 15 years. You know, we've been doing it for four. And I'd say in those 4 years, we've seen a decline in the amount of seniors that we have come in and do credit recovery because we're catching them as freshmen and sophomores. We're helping them build those credits so that we're using what we do in senior year as motivation for them to come in as freshmen and sophomores. We're using things like work-based learning and their electives. You know, they don't get an open schedule if they don't recover these credits. If you don't come into summer credit recovery and make up algebra, you're making it up your sophomore year, which means you're losing the opportunity to take ag, business, computers, family, consumer science. You're losing those opportunities. If you don't have those credits, you don't do internship as a senior. You don't get any opportunity to do online courses, credentialing like our CNA, our CDL. You don't get the opportunity to do those because you're making up credit. And so we've seen a decline in the older students needing to do it because we're catching them and we're saying, hey, it's hard for a freshman to look 3 years down the road at what their senior year looks like. So we catch them and say, you've got to think about this right now and how it impacts your senior year. And for a lot of kids, that's our motivator that gets them there. So we haven't seen as many seniors in the last 2 years as we did even the first 2 years.
And keep in mind too, that and during summer credit recovery, they're there, I mean, most of the kids are there from 8 to 4. And they've got us there to keep encouraging them on, whereas during a school day, they're very independently doing their thing or not doing their thing. A lot of the kids, the reason they're in there is because they haven't turned work in, and that's really, maybe they did okay on tests, but they didn't turn any homework in, so they're still failing the class. They probably retained a lot of the information and the material, and they've maybe even met some of the standards, a lot of the standards, but their grade, again, isn't quite there where it needs to be to pass.
Do you want to share the research you found on some neighboring districts or with similar size schools and what they are doing?
There's one school that uses the Edgenuity platform like we do. And they run it very similar to us, where they will run it year round. And basically, if a student needs to make up a course, he will make up that course or she will make up that course. They also run it in the summertime and they run it for the full month of June. And so let's say this, if a kid fails Algebra 1, what they would do, if he's failed his first semester of Algebra 1, what they would do is instead of putting him in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 second semester, they would make him do Edgenuity with Algebra 1. And then he would take that Algebra 2 class, he would take it in the summer. So or actually the second semester of Algebra 1, he would take it in the summer. That way it's consecutive and he's not doubled up in algebra, but it's also, he's getting the Algebra 1 concepts before he is fully engaged in the second semester of algebra. That makes sense.
So what is that Edgenuity? I mean, really, who runs that, you know,
It was our platform we used when we had a virtual school.
right?
It was Odysseyware before Edgenuity. But we've always had it around even before as long as we've had the virtual school, we had the Odysseyware option for the credit recovery. So for example, a kid could fail English 9 and, as a sophomore be enrolled in English 10 and also taking a different hour English 9 online. And even some of these
But what does
teachers
that look like online though, Jack? Well, I guess that's my question.
online, they're in the library with, Mrs. Davidson, taking the course online, going
Like
through
it's
the
like
online.
videos where they're
So
watching
they log
somebody?
in, they log into the platform, they log into a platform, a dashboard, it has their courses on it that they need. And then that course is broken down into units, and within each unit, there are projects, there are papers, depending on what the course is. Some are videos, and then they have to take a quiz or a test on that video, but it's essentially like teacher lesson plans on an online platform.
Okay, all right, good.
And I will say even for like the science program, there are digital labs associated where they could use, virtual instruments to conduct an investigation.
And some of our
So they'll get
teachers
on there and
use,
take that to make it a close district somewhere.
Yeah, or a teacher, let's say if they're just like, hey, he missed this unit, this is out, they say, hey, go into Edgenuity and what it aligns with her curriculum, she'd be able to pull subjects out of there and pinpoint those and front load them for that kid in the summertime.
Is most classes available on that?
Yeah.
We teach.
all
in
of our
high school?
courses.
All of them, okay. Good.
And we do utilize it, we actually talked to 4 different districts and they all use Edgenuity. One thing I think I want to give these guys credit for too, is, and I think it speaks to our kids, is the online does not work for every kid.
Sure.
And so when they come in the summer, they have these guys. And that's so much more valuable to our kids that they have somebody there. And, you know, Nicole might even sit by a kid that's doing language arts, and she's the math teacher, but she can encourage the kid and help them and help guide them and find what they need, so.
I know you asked about percentages. We're not trying, if a kid had 57%, our goal is not to get them an A in the class. Our goal is to get them a 60 and
60,
get them a
right.
credit, right?
Right.
Because that's all they're there for.
Sure,
I mean, if we're being honest. And you think about the time, in a school day, they're with us for 45 minutes. And you come in for credit recovery, you're doing math for 7 hours, it's a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot of math, even in one day.
And I get the 3 to 5%, but when I see here 15%,
Right, but again, those
That's a lot.
15% may not be a kid that didn't understand the material. It may be a kid that didn't do it for whatever reason, and they're there and they have somebody with them that's saying, okay, remember this, and they will do it because they have somebody there. It's a more personalized setting, and they get a lot done in that time. I will tell you that, they get a lot done. I could sit with a kid during summer school and they can make huge gains compared to what I can do in a classroom in 44 minutes 5 days a week. So I know, I get what you're saying, like, that's hard to see that, but having done it last year, it's legit. They're learning stuff and they're gaining knowledge, and then I see them the next year, and I have a kid working with them in Algebra 1. I'm gonna have them again as geometry. And not only have they gained the skills they needed, but now I have a connection with them, and they're probably gonna be more successful than that next year, because I know where they're at and they know me, and we can work together. I mean, there's so many benefits to that.
I will also attribute, as someone that works solely with freshmen, we have quite a few of them that are kind of hesitant to create connection, especially with adults. What kind of circumstance that comes from, I can't exactly pinpoint, because it's not the same for every kid. But that reluctancy seems to fade away when you're able to sit next to that student and work with them one-on-one and be that encouraging voice and be more direct and intentional with the type of relationship that you develop with them. I have several students from summer recovery programs that will still see me in the hallways and say hello. And I think that's something because, freshman teachers kind of sometimes get forgotten and thrown to the wayside. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. And so, to think of it in terms of the multi-tiered system of support, it also serves as not only an academic system of like a tier 2 or a tier 3, but also social emotional system, because we're working on organization. We're working on the idea of like, how do I speak to an adult? How do I ask for help? And how do I develop a relationship with someone that I haven't known very well? Because I do think that that's a part of Getting a student to invest is making sure that they understand the connection and commitment that we have to them, students.
Goes along with the executive functioning skills that the community told us they wanted to see more of out of our students from our redesign polls with our community.
And I can say honestly, I'm not a teacher, so I am not, I'm a supporter. But I will say that a lot of the kids that are in our room, in the summer are kids that definitely, and some of them have dropped out, but definitely on that at risk of dropping out. And I'm confident that summer school has saved several of those students, just because of what you just said. I don't think we can, I know it all sounds good, like, oh, we're making them feel good. Yes, but that is so important. I know you know that. But we know that kids who feel like they belong and that someone sees them at school are more likely to want to come to school and stay at school and finish. And that's a big deal.
And the
How
other
many
three
of them are
teachers,
repeaters?
the other three teachers do a really great job of making kids feel good. I would say that I don't do that.
Yeah.
So there's one of us that I come behind and when a kid really needs it, and they're there, like, you can do it, and I'm like, but if you don't do it, you fail and you take it next year,
Do
so.
we have any data if it's the same kids,
It's a mix.
freshman,
Let's get a
sophomore,
rundown.
junior,
She was
or,
gonna run
I
that.
was gonna run it. I will say
or is
that
it different kids?
it is different. I would say freshman and sophomore years, we have more repeaters, those 2 years. And then junior and senior, we have very few juniors and seniors, truly.
If you get a chance, don't hurry, but I wouldn't mind seeing it.
I'm
Just,
happy to run that for you. Yeah.
Something else to keep in mind, I think when we look at some of the juniors and seniors, sometimes our high school kids, not anything in their control, make moves in high school. And when kids make moves in high school, they don't earn credits. They get behind if they're, depending on what time of year they move. I know we had a story a few years ago of a kid who started here, went to another school that was on trimesters on the East Coast or whatever, and then came back to us, and by the time they came back to us, had not earned anything. And so some of the juniors and seniors too that we're seeing, they've had multiple moves as high schoolers, and we're trying to get them back in line, and it's not,
And
that
I
move
totally
wasn't
agree
their
with all
fault.
that. I just want to make sure that we're preparing them and they feels like they're truly, rather than just, that's my only, it's just wake up 13% in 2 days, like say in your mind, the average person that doesn't, when you've been there all semester, and all semester, you get 50 or 45% and you get 13 in 2 days. I just hope that's the hard part to get through. As you know, I coach college football and I did recruiting all over the country, and a lot of it was NCAA eligibility. So I was in high schools all the time with sophomores, juniors and seniors. All the schools had some type of credit recovery to help those kids, and I mean, it is important. I agree with all of those
Set up for it.
is that,
That's what junior college is set up.
yeah, but being at a four-year college, we didn't want them to go to junior college. They were real good. We wanted them to come play for us. So, but most of those, as I said before, the reason I'm asking many questions on this, most of those were set up to where they were 4 to 6 week programs to get that 10%. Or to get that, you know what I'm saying? It just wasn't, so that's why I had the questions.
Mrs. Murphy just ran the numbers. In 3 days of instruction at summer school equals 28 days of the semester. You figure out how many times they've been.
That's what I was just trying to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, you need,
She's a language.
Always resort to Mrs. Murphy.
And my thing is we meet 45 minutes a day during the regular school year and you're meeting 7 hours a day and you go 2 days, so you're at least gonna be 2 weeks of the school year.
Well, I would also say not all 7 hours of full go to the bowl. Nobody does that on their job.
Well, I understand that, but
But no, I get it.
Do you use Tiger Time and PLT time to pull those kids in earlier or not?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do with the freshmen, with our Freshman Success Academy, throughout the school year is, a Tiger Time work session for the first half. Since juniors and seniors have their lunch during that first half of Tiger Time. We pull those freshmen that are struggling. Our struggle point is about a 64% in the core classes, which includes health. And one of the things that we do is we pull those students in. We have, Mr. Schooley, Mr. Nelson, myself, Ms. McFadden, and Mrs. Craig actually stays on her own time frequently as well. to work with students in small group or one-on-one, to do the same kind of things that we do during summer school, or the credit recovery program, just more or less throughout the school day, to encourage them to not only learn to use that time productively, but to also, have that ability to ask questions if they're embarrassed to ask questions. Or again, to create that connection with that teacher that actually shows that they truly care and want them to be successful. One of the things that I want to mention, just as someone that has had students need to attend with varying grades, I mean, from anywhere from a 47% to a 58%. I would say that academic rigor is of the utmost importance in our program. As the person that planned all of the materials for the students in science, I actually went to all the science teachers and said, what did this kid need to redo? And that's how I set their programs on Edgenuity, was based on what the kid needed to finish and the level of work and how far away from the 60% that student was. Because the further behind they were, the more intense the work that was prescribed.
And sophomores are assigned PLTs, which means instead of having their freedom during quarters 1 and quarter 3, so starting in August, starting in January, they're assigned a PLT teacher. And if they have all A's and B's by the next quarter, they get out of that assigned PLT and can spend their PLT in the commons or the library. But that's kind of an intervention for our sophomores as well, trying to catch them before they get to that junior year. Assigned until they can prove that they're on the path.
Is there any other board members have any questions?
I do.
We're approached our 30 minutes. Go ahead. No, that's good. Jim.
On student C in your box, can you explain that a little more in depth? Because I'm not following the math in my head here either. If they
Don't
fail.
mind you. Here, let me help you out. Because I don't care if you
If
tell
they
me.
failed 10 classes and only recovered 2 credits, and then fail 3 and recover 5.
They worked on some of the ones they failed as a sophomore, a freshman, again, the sophomore year, the next summer. Like they didn't recover very much in that first summer. The next summer they came back and they were getting it at that point. So they were able to knock out a whole bunch more that second time.
I know who the student is just by reading the description, which is because I worked all 4 years, not because it's identifiable. But I will say that this is a student that was very close in all of the classes as well. So the intensity of the work
Lots of
was,
50s, upper
Yes.
50s.
yes, was much lower.
Okay, but I was just confused and recovered 2 credits and then recovered 5 classes. So,
Yes, and maybe we should have said classes instead of credits, but yes. But the point is that she didn't accomplish much in that first summer, but then was able to knock a bunch of more out the next summer from the freshman year.
okay, so
Also, a class might be a 0.5 credit.
Right.
It's a semester course. I teach some semester courses, so one class might be 0.5 credit. So let's say they do 4 classes that are for 0.5 credit, they get 2 credits. So
okay,
there's also that.
Yes.
Some semester courses are 0.5.
Yes.
okay. And then I know in January, we had a presentation about credit recovery, and it said students are limited to 1 credit recovery per semester. So how do they do that much in the summer? I'm not following.
That's for fall numbers.
The December.
Like
The
the
December,
December credit.
yes.
We're talking about summer credit recovery, which is a lot longer. The December credit recovery after fall, they have one opportunity there, but they have to have a 55 to 59 to be able to participate, and they can just do 1 class.
1 class and they
Has to be in that,
recover it in December.
right, or, well, in this year we did it during.
It is during Tiger.
If they have more than they're on Edgenuity. That's-
If, right, they have more. they
Or
have more
retaking
than
the class.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I didn't know that difference. Appreciate that.
And
Go ahead.
is when it says the total of 56 students participated in summer school 2022 and 23, is that a high number or is that average?
We've only done it for.
Yeah, I would say that one was kind of,
Because that was several weeks long.
Yeah,
Where
it was
now
an
it's
interest.
So
28.
22 was a 2-week long one.
Right.
Right. So we had kids coming in and out, we had a lot more time.
right.
some more kids, but yeah, that was bigger.
So it
I'm
used to
trying
be
to
2 weeks and then it got narrowed down.
Yeah, we're down.
from there to
And part of that 2 week was coming out of that 2020 school year
Exactly.
and kids.
Yeah.
Those credits. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
We've worked with Inver every year.
So we also sometimes identify, if the middle school works with us and helps us identify some of those students coming out of eighth grade who are already showing signs of struggle. Laurel and Kelsey have worked with them in kind of a transition plan for freshman year, just to kind of help grab them early.
And in previous years, we've had, I believe, 3 days of time together, and
In office.
that model, yeah. That model has, yielded more positive relationships to start the school year with. This last school year, we only got 1 day, and I will say, I do notice a difference in the productiveness and the quality of the relationship that I was able to build in that 1 day versus 3 days.
Anybody else? Great questions? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Anyway, I'm just curious to see if, on the credit recovery part of it. When these kids go through this, before we even get to the credit recovery process, for instance, are we looking at a percentage of our students that, for instance, in chronic absenteeism? Okay, so now there's a correlation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
At the same time, what I'm wondering about is that are we providing the necessary intervention to be able to coordinate the efforts between, let's say, the parents, the teachers and the counselors prior to the end of the semester, before we even get to that point where we're actually at that F stage, for instance? That's what I'm wondering. Are we being able to, do we have a work in place method, for instance, to be able to get to that point on an individual teacher basis, to be able to do some type of intervention before we have to give an F at the end of the semester to go to credit recovery?
That's where back scheduling those freshmen and sophomores at Tiger Time in their PLT. You know, and we send out.
The chronic absentee meetings that you guys have monthly.
Yeah, I meet monthly with, administrators and the counselors at each building, and we talk about, I run the chronic absentee list, and we also look at the failure list, who's failing right now. And we kind of look at that and discuss each situation, and then, decide how we're gonna go from there. I will say that, especially with our freshmen, Laurel has tried really hard to get meetings with parents of some of our kids that are most at risk, and we just don't have a lot of success. Truthfully, I mean, there's some aren't that I would say.
We have a student currently that was brought to sit as a part of the sit process that is showing improvement. But it took getting to the sit process to kind of make parents more, I guess, aware of the seriousness of the scenario. I will tell you today, I emailed a parent that decided to pull their student out for a lunch. And I don't know the circumstances of the lunch, but I will tell you, I emailed that parent because that student is chronically absent, and I did let that parent know that your kid missed a test earlier this week, and we were planning on making that up today. It would be great if they could be here tomorrow. So, as a teacher, I will tell you, we email frequently, whether we get an email back or not. It's a little bit different. Sometimes we go to measures with like phone calls. I have gone as far as texting. Sometimes texting is more effective. People are just more comfortable with it in this day and age of technology. However, there's effort put in by teachers, there's effort put in by admin. We report truancy. And what that gets followed up on is kind of out of our hands.
So when
It's-
parents are
it
involved, it
is
helps a lot.
Student intervention team, in
Yes.
case you guys
Yes.
were bad about using acronyms, but every school
I'm
has a
sorry.
student intervention team.
Sorry.
And then
Check.
frequently-
Quiz.
Sorry, I have.
I
have alphabet.
Everything. Yeah, I got a special course for you.
I'm sure. I'll bring the food and drink.
Anything else for tonight? Thank you for your time. Appreciate y'all
Thank
coming.
you for coming, and thanks for.
Clarifying.
Thanks,
So,
guys.
very much.
Appreciate it.
Providing that, appreciate that. All right, it's first one, next one. Number two, the school security. School security. Brett, you talk about the information that you got this year?
Yeah, you know. Part of this was, some of this started, I assume, with you guys' interest in talking about it, began at our facility tour. And seeing some of these facilities and what our needs are and what needs are coming down the road. And some, as you know, school safety and security is important. And our schools right now we have safe and secure facilities right now. We continue to improve and do things. We work with law enforcement. But as you know, as it comes to school safety, you can always do more. And you're always planning, you're always thinking. We do crisis drills at every building. And so some of those, the big pieces that and these aren't tomorrow needs, these are future items that we might want to consider down the road. And as I've explained to you guys before, if anything does come up that jeopardizes security or safety, they are addressed and fixed and taken care of immediately. And so, but the reality is many of our buildings were built in the 30s or 40s and some in the 60s. And so some of that infrastructure is outdated as it relates to school safety and security. Some of the bigger ones are safe and secure entrances. Most of our buildings, you can walk right into the building and you don't have to interact or go through a second or a third door before you get into the facility. And so they call them vestibules, where you come in the door. You can't go straight into the building, then you go into the office, you have to speak to a person, and then you go out another door. Obviously, that's not something that could be addressed in a summer project or something like that. Intercom systems in general, are outdated in most all of our buildings. Do they function? Do they work? Yes. But the middle school is one that we're gonna have to look at sooner than any of the others. It was a power surge or a power issue. Something knocked parts and pieces of it out, and it's real finicky. So we have to, at some point, in my opinion, take care of that within the next handful of months.
Those numbers seem pretty high.
Sorry.
I said those numbers seem pretty high.
Sure. And so is what I did. I have no idea. Like so I called BHS and I said, hey, on some of your newer school projects that you've done, what has been the per square foot cost of these parts and pieces to buildings?
So they're saying, yeah, but they're saying that to put a new intercom system, that must be putting all new wiring and everything in.
Yeah.
And I mean, wow.
And again, these are high level numbers. These aren't based on our facility. This is new construction right now. You gotta remember that too. And they're building school. I mean, some of them coming off of, $500 a square foot in a school. And I think prices have come down in the last couple of years, but anyhow, high level, but just to get in the neighborhood, this is what BHS used based on some other new projects they've done. So. And then
I have to get in the intercom business. Yeah.
And a lot of it, I don't even want to pretend to know the ins and outs of this, but at least that is a starting point to give you an idea of we wanted to. And then we included the cost and of what a police officer wage is, and again, your average wage and costs, and in visiting with law enforcement at MOU and a couple of different times, they've expressed their biggest concern is not that they wouldn't want to do that, but it is they've had an extremely hard time finding enough officers to even fill their.
That's been the problem here. We've had in the past, from Bill, and we've had some other people was really good at it. When he did it, and then just once we left, then just finding someone to do it, and, the sheriff's department.
And the crisis,
Just short.
and the
short on
crisis
helping.
drills have been great because of all the new sheriff and officers that have been in. We hit every school last year with crisis drills. Jacqueline heads that up and does an amazing job coordinating community efforts. And through that, all the officers get to meet our principals and our administrators and our staff in our buildings. And surprisingly, through those, they've even asked multiple times, well, can we just come up yeah, come up anytime, walk the halls, be in our buildings. And so it's really helped with the relationship. And so you see officers in our buildings a lot more, and lots of times they're not there to for a specific purpose other than just to be present. And so there's been some really neat relationship building things. And then it's also allowed all of our officers, new and veteran, to be in every nook and cranny of every one of our buildings. And they've even, after hours, will go in and use our buildings to train. Every officer carries a badge that will get them into any door in any building 24 hours a day. That came from some of our safety drills. They've given us tips on how to be more safe and secure, like where could we put some mirrors to where they can, if they're coming down a hallway, they can see down another hallway so that they can be prepared, or strategically placing maps within our building that they can quickly access. We're working on now getting them the ability to connect immediately to our Wi-Fi when they're in our buildings, because their radios don't work really well when they're inside of our buildings. And so there's been some really great things that have come from the safety drills and the coordination and the partnerships that we've developed. And when we do those, they bring in a highway patrol, the local highway patrol officer too, who would be patrolling our area in case they respond. They've been in our buildings, they've seen our buildings, they know our facilities. And so, they just finished using might not have been the best night with middle school track and softball and everything else. It was a zoo up there, but. Yeah, so again, I don't know what else you would like from me or need from me, but I'm happy to.
You know, from my standpoint of it, is I think it would be great. I mean, I think it is to have a resource officer, police officers in the buildings, even if it's not the full time. If that costs us money, $20 an hour, 22, whatever that is, I think that's worth doing with the time that we live in. And I think that's the best deterrent that there is, in my opinion. Not that they have to be there full time, but hours, and vary the hours around, you know, when they're there. And I think it's a wise investment in our security. Something to look at, you know, can we do it this year in the budgeting? We got a lot of other things to do, but I'd like to work towards that, even if it's for the following year. To what we could do, and it looks like by price per square foot, when I looked at this, and I looked when Jeff looked at it, I'm like, holy cow, but the cheapest way and probably the most effective real is the camera and surveillance. I mean, that's what's on there is the cheapest. And I know I've visited with them, you've done your meeting, I've visited with a couple of them, and I don't think it'd be too hard to get that camera and surveillance system where it's all Wi-Fi. And if the Wi-Fi goes down, you know, everything goes wrong. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter if you can't watch TV or you can't surf the web, or, you know what I'm saying? It's just a crisis for everybody if the Wi-Fi goes down. But I think we could get a Wi-Fi system that would tie in, maybe even down there to the police station, where something would come up, they could have that through Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying? But I think the officers in the school, especially middle school and high school, I still don't think it hurts in the elementary schools, maybe not as much a rotating thing, but to try to move that way and you know, break your meetings in the month, see, you know, how even at Wakefield, you know, I mean, it's important, I think. And if we got to pay for those at $25 an hour or whatever it is with benefits and reimburse them, and I'd like us to kind of move that way. I think that would be important to do that. So that's my thoughts on it. And the projects are projects, you know what I'm saying? Eventually, I agree, you know, again, I still fall back on my recruiting. A lot of the schools I went into is that all the newer ones had it to where you had to go through at least 2 doors to get access to the students and staff. I mean, that's how, with older buildings, that's an issue, you know. Wakefield's got a pretty easy setup. I thought by going through there, you could put a set of glass doors that goes towards the old gym and you know, the library's kind of on its own, but you could create a little corridor there where they'd have to go in through the office and back out through the office, you know, and that's how a lot of them are set up. So I just think, yeah, as we go, you know, times are different. There just are a lot of strange things happening, and whatever we can do to continue to protect the students and staff, I think we need to look at this. So. Anybody else, any thoughts or?
Yeah, Brett, by chance, probably right now, work all over school. And do they have like a surveillance camera system? At least a basic,
Yes.
okay,
Mhm.
on that. So, on that,
What's a camera up to, Mr. Young, now?
If you're gonna run one, just like it hooks into your existing system, you're gonna pay between $5,000 and $6,000 for an additional camera. And then if it's like a Wi-Fi one, like if you're gonna run it out by the tennis course, it's not, you know, it's gonna have to be hooked in, it's $7,000 to $8,000. I mean, they're expensive.
We're on year 11 of having our cameras, so every year they add. I don't know how many, are you buying any more this year? So they're those first few years, they kept adding until, I think I heard Mr. Weller say the other day, every hallway's covered now at Lincoln on his system.
I got a software update that's coming, it's gonna cost me $4.
And so that's, you know, yes, Dave, they all do have a version, and now we're done over such a long period of time, you're getting to that decade mark to where then now where you started, you're starting to have to. And so it's at that point of, you know, where's that cut point? And then if you do it, you kind of want somebody who knows what they're doing to do a comprehensive study on our buildings and designs and systems where they can all be tied together, they work together. So, you know, and so we're kind of getting to that point of everything's starting to age out. So it's, where do we go? What do we do? How do we put it all together to where it's a cohesive, systematic approach to it and not.
And maybe it's something too, just to look forward. I know they don't always pay a lot, but as much grant money as we can get to help with it, you know.
But we talked about putting the keypads on the interior doors, is that on here?
It wasn't, we could look at what that number would be. It wouldn't,
Probably about the same per door, is what you paid on the other ones, maybe.
2,000 or 3,000
Be a lot
a
more
door.
doors though.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more doors, but you know. But
I'll add that to this chart, Jason. That's a good idea.
again, if it's one school at a time, we're making progress towards it, you know what I'm saying, or not certain doors in each building, maybe it's the classrooms or whatever, you know what I'm saying, just those certain doors and that I think that, some doors, but I think we just need to keep making improvements.
It's probably a pretty scary number, but
Can, there's a lot of doors.
869. I was just counting in my head. There's a bunch.
Yeah. But, anything else with that?
I like, you know, basically what you brought up about law enforcement, for instance, on that, I guess, like you say, I look at the positive side of the flip coin too. You know, for instance, on being able to at least have a presence. If we can't do it at all times, then at some of the times. That, law enforcement, to me, it's also community relations with the students itself and the faculty. You know, for instance, you know, especially when they don't know there's a set date or set time. Let's say when that law enforcement individual is going to come in and visit at that facility, that to me, it's a peace of mind. For one thing, you know, to look at it that way too. So if you can't afford to do it on a full-time basis, then if you can do it, let's say on a contract basis, and be able to do it, for instance, to where that law enforcement person or agency can do it at that facility in that community, on a, whatever.
Even breakfast.
Yeah, whatever schedule that works out best for both parties involved. Then, to me, I just feel that, you know, it's a good, you get the benefit also of community relations with your students and your faculty too.
Do we have a reserved parking spot at schools for police officers?
I think I'm going through my memory bank, but pretty much, yes.
Anybody else? Question? No? Very good. All right, keeping all district facilities open. This wasn't, assuming this was on their list. Who's the ones that put on it? I had Brett get all this information, he said, provide this information, that whatever's on the list, whoever wanted to visit about it. Concerns or.
I think it was Dave. This was yours.
Oh, I'm sorry, keeping you open. Alex, what do you want to talk about, Dave?
Basically, when I came up with that idea, it was, I was looking at, well, what are two communities? For instance, of course, naturally placing with our district facilities here. And then plus with Wakefield on that. The logistics of our county is another thing that was high in my, I suppose on my list, for instance, on being able to make sure that we're able to provide as a unified district, we're able to provide the much needed source of resources as a public school system within our district, county district, for instance, on that. So, my deal is that I know that ratio wise, cost wise, things like that. Yes, there's times where let's say, for example, Wakefield School, okay, per pupil is going to be X amount of dollars more, for instance, to keep this facility open, things like that, all this stuff. The thing about it is that if the benefits outweigh the cost to a certain extent, then to me, it's worth it. Because for one thing, I look at also the logistics. I'll go back to that again on that because of extra transportation costs, for instance, on busing students, for instance, from 40, 50 miles away to a facility that is in the part of the district compared to being able to make sure that, okay, we can go ahead and keep both communities open on the schools. So that was basically my point right there, making sure that we can, physically be able to keep all of our district schools open. Through the years, I've noticed, and everybody else no doubt has noticed, we've closed Morganville, we've closed Longford, we've closed Green School, for instance, and other communities that we've been providing educational services in for quite some time, for many, many years. And we had to do that, unfortunately, it's not a pleasant situation by no means. But, to be able to make it feasible, of course, to the taxpayers, to our staff or district, et cetera, then it came to that crunch time point on that. I just feel that I don't want to get to that point, and I feel that we can do everything possible to not get to that point where we have to look at shuttering a district school, a district facility in a community.
So, my feelings is this, is that in the, to compare that was hard. I remember being around probably when they closed those schools, but, there was this amount of kids K through 8, and then it's what there is even in one class at Wakefield. There just wasn't very many kids in the whole school at all, you know what I'm saying? And so.
We closed Longford, there was 2 combined classrooms and 2 teachers
Yeah.
for 5 grades.
So, it's not even compared, and so, here's my thoughts are that as long as the enrollment is there, which it is, and it's also our job to do what we can to try to increase the enrollment, we can, to not get to that situation. You know, so, yeah, it's gonna cost a little bit more, but we're a two-town community, we're a unified school district, the costs are not outlandish for the second one, so I think that Wakefield community with the lake down there, the houses are all full, I mean, the tax base and all that, it's positive for the county. I believe that. And, you know, I was down there, the project lead, the amount of kids they have involved. I mean, that school is doing great things down there. And, I have no interest in looking at that. You know, maybe someday everybody faces it with the high school and enrollment, but again, if we do a good job keeping our best to keep good teachers down there in a good place, I think there'll be kids that want to go to school. That type, that K through 12, there's a group of people, that's how they want their kids to go to school. And, so I think it's a good facility. There's no doubt we can maintain it now, and it's our job to make it better. So hopefully we don't get into an enrollment situation. That's how I feel. Anybody else, any comments? So, I mean, got the older building, hell, they all do. You know, you go through that list, and there's all things that we gotta do. And like any school district, you gotta prioritize it, and then eventually those maintenance things become too big, and then we gotta look at another option. You can't handle it through the year. No, that's my thoughts on it. So, anybody else have anything?
Yeah.
Question? All right. After that first one.
I think everyone got turned off the long one.
Okay, so the line of communication chart, you know, when Britton was here, this is one thing he brought up, and when we went to the boardmanship, for us new board members, they brought up this chart, and, you know, I know Jeff, you brought up when we talked a little bit about communication, when somebody calls you and it's like, hey, you need to call the principal, or you need to call.
You're calling the wrong person.
Yeah, you know, but at least,
Yeah.
you know, this gives.
Where's our flow chart that we have? Our administrative flow chart.
Organization.
Yeah.
Organizational
Yeah.
chart.
Can you make a copy of that?
Is that this is like, hey, somebody calls you, there's a transportation thing, here's who you need to call, you know, I mean, it's, but, so I just want to make sure, you know, we take time to discuss this, and even if we got to make changes to it to make it more specific for our district, I think this is a great thing to have. I think it's a great thing to give to parents, you know, when school starts, and the information that we provide them, you know, Brett, and let them know, who to contact. I do have a few questions. So at the end here, it says Board of Education on all, sometimes level 5, sometimes on level 6, you know what I'm saying? So if we get to that point, and so you say to them, well, have you discussed this with the superintendent? And they say yes. How does everybody see it proceeding from there?
So it's in our policy.
Okay,
And so it's complaints, is it KN? I can't remember, but it's a complaints policy, and there's a form, and they fill it out. They go through the steps. If they get to me and they want to go above me and they want to go get to you guys, they fill out a form, and it's a due process system, and it's a little different if it's related to student discipline. Then there's a process and a form within that policy for them to get to the board, and if it's student discipline, it's a due process hearing, and they could be entitled to a right with the board if they want to take it that far. And again, there's a form they fill out. There's typically timelines and an amount of days in between that they respond, we have to respond. If it's a general complaints, then there's a general complaint form. So every policy that it has a process to get to the board. So maybe if you'd like to walk through an example, or I don't know if that helps or not.
yeah. So let's say that, I don't know why.
So this thing Jacqueline's passing out, this is our flow chart for our district.
Right.
As to the pecking order. I mean, just to let you know, I mean, like, we're at the top. You got superintendent, board clerk, board attorney, the people that fall under those people.
Right.
You know, so it's not only if you got a problem, but there's also this that, you know, there's kind of a pecking order of who you go to as far as that goes. And who's under who as far as where it's gonna go, so.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, so some examples, Tracy, would be like, I'm in our policy book here.
Mhm.
And so if there's a process to get to the board for complaints of discrimination, complaints of sexual harassment, complaints of student discipline as it relates to suspension, there's a form and a process, textbooks and materials, there's a form and a process. Instructional materials and media centers, there's a process. Here's complaints, I was way off, it's not KN, it's JCE. And so again, there's a complaint process, there's a number of days, and general complaint would capture anything. And so informal procedures goes through the building principal for first, and I'm just gonna summarize here a little bit. The principal has to conduct an investigation, set up a time and meeting with the person to hear their complaint. If the matter is not resolved at the satisfaction of the individual in the meeting with the principal, or if the individual does not believe the resolution remains acceptable, then individual may initiate a formal complaint. And then it outlines the formal complaint procedures. And there's a form that they would fill out. They describe the alleged complaint or violation. If they don't wish to file a written complaint and the matter has not been adequately resolved through the informal procedures, the building principal may initiate the complaint themselves and send it up the ladder. If appropriate, an investigation shall follow the filing of the complaint, then it has a number of days. And then it goes to building principal, compliance coordinator, or other individual appointed by the board or the superintendent. The investigation shall be informal but thorough, so it goes up to the next person in line. And then they have to do a formal investigation, then they have to provide a written report back to the person filing the complaint within a certain amount of days. If the investigator anticipates a determination will not be issued, we gotta give them time. Formal complaint appeal. The complaint or respondent may appeal the determination of the complaint. Appeal shall be heard by the district compliance coordinator, a hearing officer appointed by the board or superintendent, or by the board itself. The request to appeal the resolution shall be made within 20 days. The appeal officer shall review the evidence gathered. The appeal officer will issue a written determination of the complaint. And then the last part is, of course, they can make it to the request a formal hearing with the board if they want. So that one kind of captures all others, but student discipline or
What about-
discrimination.
I guess my question is, that apply for a student, parent? They all have that same process? Classified, certified staff, I mean, can they all go through that same thing? I guess that's my.
Casey, I would think that if something got to us on this chart, there better be a pretty good paper trail from everything else that's before they got to us.
Right.
I mean, ought to be forms filled out, people talked to,
And so
things like that, before it ever gets to us, if it's that bad.
But I agree, but you know, some people don't get what they want, and they just.
Sure,
So
sure.
when does that come to the board? You know what I'm saying? I mean.
Well, more than likely, it's gonna go through him.
No, I get that, but they go see him. And
Then
I
he's-
don't have any instances now. I'm
No,
just
but
talking about
he's gonna make
hypothetical.
them fill out some paperwork before it comes to us.
Right, but I'm just saying, if they get through and they're not satisfied, they call you again, then what do?
They call you or me.
Me, they call me and say, listen, I had a long meeting, been through this internal investigation, I don't agree with the findings.
Then,
So
then,
where does it go from there?
sure, so
That's when
to
they
me,
appeal
it
to
would
the
be,
board.
give me a call and I'll help you research policy. What policy does it fall under? And then I could reference whatever the form or the process is to initiate the next step. And then you could share that back with me.
More than likely, it's gonna be an appeal, and we're gonna be the appeal board.
That's what it usually.
Okay.
So,
Couple times.
but yeah, it's happened a couple times but we're gonna be that's why I say when somebody calls you, you don't wanna ignore them, but you don't wanna feed yourself into something that down the road, if you're on the appeal board, got yourself in trouble. So you always want to direct them in the right direction
Right.
or to the right person and tell them to go through the channels. And then if it doesn't, if they get to him and they're not satisfied, then they gonna have to come and appeal to us where we're gonna be the ones. So you don't want to have yourself stuck in a situation where you know too much before it comes to you.
Right, oh, yeah, no, I get that, There's-
And the other thing I might add there,
Go ahead.
that I think you have to be careful of when you start talking about the appeal process and you guys as officers is, you know, and of course, I think there are different things here. There's
Sure, no question.
someone that's upset about the grass on the football field
Right.
versus, you
Sure.
know, whatever, but when you get into due process issues, the whole purpose of due process is that that person gets a fair hearing. And so when one of the places that you see boards getting in trouble on what I'll say are big decisions is, you know, a board member talks to somebody or hears from something good. Yeah, that's wrong. Here's the decision, or here's my mind made up. Well, they go through the process and don't get where they want to be. And they've always got this argument to come back and say, I didn't get due process because Jeff had his mind made up before I ever got to him, you know, so
Sure.
that whole thing, I think, just interacts in these situations to
Right.
make it where you got it, to kind of say, nope, follow this and it'll eventually get to me. So,
And in my time,
But that's why this is helpful for me. I don't know if it is for everybody else. I say, okay, well, you didn't like the answer that principal gave you. The next one is go to the curriculum director. Get a hold of her and visit with her.
You don't like it there, go to the next step.
Right, but at least it's right there all in one page and
Yeah, absolutely.
a little bit different. I get this, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously, but this. So I would just, I guess my whole
see
thing.
an example is like,
Mhm.
if it gets to me, especially if we're talking general complaints, or most of the time it's, would be a student discipline type deal, are the main times. Like when I sit down and meet with that person, I'll print our policy. And I give them our policy and it has the form included with that policy. Like if they don't agree with that, what I'm sharing with them, 9 times out of 10, especially if you can generally tell somebody's happy, you know, if where they're gonna leave and what environment they're gonna leave the meeting, but I'll hand our policy with the complaint form.
And it worked the same way it's with like classified staff or. I mean, if they called us and say, relay them to, I mean, I don't want to get involved. I want to be able to point in the right direction so everybody's following in the chain of command. You know what I'm saying? Is that,
You know, do we have,
so that's why I mean, Brett, so if you don't take, like,
Yeah.
nothing for next month, but just kind of take a look at this and see how it fits in ours, you know?
one piece we might wanna add is special ed. Or tele.
It's on there.
Oh, it's right here, there you go.
Yeah.
So if you talk to, if it was a classified staff, you mentioned classified staff, so yes, this is, yeah, that would get a parent or a classified staff.
And then is this covered, like line of communication, is it covered by the negotiated agreement as far as teachers and that go? And
They have their own
They have their
complaint
own process
procedure within their.
and all that type of deal. I'll let you take a peek at that. Anybody else have anything? What's it called now? Comments? You all feel like it'd be helpful? I don't want to create work for somebody, you know, but to get it to match up with the school district and hand that out. I mean, I feel like it'd be a helpful piece of deal. Not only that, but even when parents, they get it to see it, and this is who you call.
Well, we could include it in our student handbook.
Right. Yeah.
That would be,
Good idea.
No, we get it.
Staff handbooks, student handbooks.
Yeah.
Class book.
Appendix and all that.
Yeah, put it all in.
So I'll get a laminated one and I used to say put it on my phone, but now your phone's with you all the time. You have to carry around your wallet, but
PDF file in your phone.
I can hang it on the door. No, is it hang it in my office?
Download it and archive it.
So, yeah. All right, very good. That's everything we have on the list for tonight.
Personnel.
And then we have, I saw just a discussion deal, so, and you know, there were some other ones, just real quick, there's some other ones I talked to Brett about, and he's just gonna spread those out. Like, there's not a lot of stuff on the board meeting, so we can have good discussions, but I think the rest of them we can just fit in. He's gonna try to, some of them overlap with what we already have in there, and we're gonna continue on the list and just keep going with it, okay? And if we just don't feel like we're getting too far behind, we gotta do this for another hour some night here or there. I'm good with that if we need to do that. So, but my whole goal is, you know, make the regular meetings go faster on some of that's being new and wanting to discuss some of this stuff. So, but you just gotta let me know. All right? Okay, so personnel. Is that,
That was up to the board. Do you guys need an executive session?
I don't. So. Do you share? No, great. I'm good. Good. All right, so personnel,
I move we approve personnel as listed.
got a motion?
Second.
And a second? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. With that, I move we adjourn the meeting. Second, all those in favor?